there so that you can ask questions when you want, right?
Yes, sir.
Good. Because I've got it in front of me as well.
Okay, we're starting.
All right.
Thank you for listening.
Put them down. Stay in step. Sounding good. Listen up. Got to learn. New cadence.
Here we go.
You can do it. Listen up. Stay in step. Keep clapping.
Okay.
There you go.
We know what that means. It's
I can barely hear this
with
stuff.
those cadence calls, we know what time it is. It's time for David's Pick on America's Web Radio, and anybody that's served can appreciate and loves cadence calls. And as I mentioned to our General Dix, and he and I, in fact, he generally starts his show by singing a cadence call, which many generals won't do that, but General Dix does. And
Sounds good.
well, I don't think anybody's been through the military that doesn't appreciate cadence calls, and the many times that they've gotten us through a close situation where you thought you couldn't take another step. Well, a drill sergeant or a platoon leader or somebody would start up a cadence call, and you'd take that next step and make it. So today we have Wulf Robert Lindenau on, and he is a recipient and a inductee into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And Wulf retired as a major, I believe. Is that correct, Wulf?
That's correct.
And welcome to America's Web Radio, and we're going to hear your story and talk about what the Hall of Fame has meant to you. And if you haven't been to the Military Veterans Hall of Fame, the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, which is the premier Veterans Hall of Fames in the United States, and it's being copied in many areas. The director of it is Colonel Rick White, retired, and Colonel White has just done a fantastic job. So, Wulf, when were you inducted?
Well, I think that's probably ongoing. There's a requirement to have been in Georgia either as a native or here 10 years. I have been here 10 years just now, this month as a matter of fact. So I think the process is ongoing as we speak.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure it'll be a delight to have you in the Hall of Fame. By the way, the Hall of Fame is open Monday through Friday, and it's across the street from the state capitol of Georgia in the, I just went blank. The name of that building, Sloppy Floyd, I can't think of his name. Anyway, it's right across the street from the state capitol, downtown Atlanta, and they do have a very good, make it a full day, and it really does take you a day to go through it all, and they have a very good restaurant there, and cafeteria style, but it's home cooking, and you'll enjoy it. So whenever you're in Atlanta, coming to Atlanta, or live in Atlanta, and you haven't ever heard of it, you need to go down to the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. And
Here.
It'll be a very enjoyable day. And I think more and more, Wulf, and you can certainly correct me on this, but more and more we need to honor our veterans. And it doesn't matter which war it is or what they did. If they gave their time and we all raised our hands and gave our oath that we would protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, both against foreign and domestic, if it happens to be that way. So it's just veterans are veterans. And as I say many times and said on this show hundreds of times, I don't know of a bigger fraternity or sorority in the world than the United States military. And, excuse me, you can walk in and almost, I don't know if it's whether you see it or smell it, but you can tell a veteran. And they are distinct, and we salute them every day. I have a flag in front of me. I have the fold of the flag here, and it was interesting the other day. I was flipping channels, and they, for some reason, they had, it was Flag Day. That's why they had it on, and it was showing the folding of the flag. And widows of veterans are given a flag in if it comes off the casket of their whoever's been lost.
That's
but
right.
Anyway,
that's how it works.
So, welcome to America's Web Radio, and looking at your bio, Wulf, I think it might be easier to just ask, what have you not been involved in, as opposed to what you have and are involved in?
Well, you want to spare everybody a lot of nonsense, because, I mean, when you read a bio, particularly the lengthy one I prepared, that puts you to sleep. So let's see if we can keep people awake.
Okay, that's a fair deal. And you served 20 and a half years, correct?
That's correct.
In
uniform, and then 23 more years as a civilian in the government.
So did that transfer?
Oh yeah. I combined both of them, so I have pretty close to 44 years in the government.
Wow.
I of course, that means I enlisted in the Army when I was 5 years old. How I wish.
Yeah, it would.
But go ahead, please. Take a look at wherever you think would be an interesting point to talk about. Then we can talk about that, and we just simply move down the list, and I can tell you where I came from and how I ended up being where I am today.
Okay, yeah. I don't know where you are today, but
well, I'm here in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, today, but that's not where I came from, because I was born in East Prussia, Germany, during the end of World War II. So
wow.
That's a long jump from being a German who didn't speak a single word of English to being a retired Army officer.
That is.
And who served in the government for about 44 years or so.
And you speak English a whole lot better than Kissinger.
Well, I didn't initially, because I haven't. My knuckles got wrapped enough until I finally learned how to do it.
Okay. Well, and I want to mention, you said you're in Peachtree Corners.
Yes.
The memorial.
No peaches here, by the way.
Pardon me?
No peaches here.
No peaches there, huh?
Got to go to North Carolina to get them.
But you are very close to a very nice memorial.
Oh, we have a beautiful one here in Peachtree Corners. I went
sir.
to the dedication of that, as a matter of fact. And one of the fellows who was talking there was an Army Major General who was a student of mine at West Point.
Ah.
Yeah, that really kind of surprised me. There he was. He was our featured speaker at the dedication of the Vietnam well, not Vietnam, but the Veterans Memorial at Peachtree Corners.
Interesting.
Beautiful place, by the way.
And,
very, very nicely done.
Hopefully,
Flags and markers and the whole 9 yards. Worthy of a visit.
Hopefully, we're going to be getting our memorial up in Johns Creek, the Healing Wall.
Well, it is already up, the Healing Wall.
Well,
it is up.
But
in fact, I went there recently. We had some wonderful pictures we took. It's going to be in the newsletter that Rick is going to publish, I'm sure.
Oh, good.
We've had some great ceremonies. We have another one coming up on the 24th, where we have the first gathering of the members of the Johns Creek Veterans Association, and we're having a luncheon there. Bring your own stuff, whatever you want to eat or drink, and bring your own chair, too, by the way. It's going to be outside. So the wall, the Healing Wall exists. It is a marvelous structure with wonderful flags on it and a very large American flag. So every one of us feels very much at home at that, let me tell you.
Well,
magnificent achievement for Georgia.
Well, we have to have the dedication at some point because of the vandalism, and I hope eventually they catch the folks that vandalized the wall.
Well, we're gonna have cameras now that we're going to focus on that. So we're going to make sure that the next one that comes along that tries to deface it, we're going to get pictures of them.
Well, the Healing Wall has meant a lot to so many families, and I think Roger Wise has one of the best stories going with it.
Yeah. Well, he does a lot of very fantastic stories. He's a very interesting gentleman. I know him. In fact, he brought me into the Johns Creek Veterans Association.
Well, let me ask you something, and I ask every guest this, and being a veteran and associating with other veterans, and that's what you do almost day in and day out.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever met a veteran that only has one story?
Or one story that is anything but lengthy. That's right.
But no,
Yep.
it's always fun. I've been to the Johns Creek Veterans Association a couple of times, and it's always interesting to sit at the table.
Oh, yes, it is. You're right.
It doesn't matter whether it's Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, whatever. It doesn't matter. A story is being told all the time.
And there are good people there that have fantastic backgrounds in all areas of the military in the United States.
Absolutely.
Not only Army, we have Navy, Air Force, Marines, you name it.
You got it, and it's I can just sit there and listen and get a kick out of it, and I think what Bob Babcock has done and others, a couple of others have done on writing them down and talking to veterans and getting their stories and putting them in books or whatever, and I just think that's fantastic. And one other thing that we do, and I'll let you do it. I'll start you, and then I'll wind you up, and you can go with it.
Okay.
All right, and that is that today, any parent, grandparent, or kid that is graduating from high school or college and doesn't know what they want to do, we recommend that they look at the military. It is my son's in the Air Force. He's in Intel in Germany, a major, and he and his wife have had wonderful experiences touring Europe, and they were in Hawaii for a while. And so
Bravo, that is wonderful.
Any kid that's about to graduate, they really, really need to take a look at our military.
Well, that's how I got into it, Dave.
I'll let you tell it.
My stepfather was an Army colonel, and when I graduated from high school in Heidelberg, Germany, I really had no clue on what I wanted to do, and most high school kids don't. So I turned to my stepdad and said, "Dad, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, what do you mean what I think? There's only one solution, military. Go for it." So I went down to Frankfurt to enlist in the military, and of course I didn't have any proof that I was an American other than my ID card, and that didn't suffice. And so the guy told me, "We don't take Krauts. Go home." So I went back to my stepfather and said, "Hey, I need proof of being an American citizen." So we got a passport made based on my brother and siblings. We became American citizens when my mother was naturalized. We were too small to get a certificate, so we got something called derivative citizenship. And based on my mother's naturalization, I was able to get a passport, therefore prove my American citizenship. And then I went back and enlisted in the Army at that time. And the sergeant was so peeved to see me again, only this time I had the proper documentation. I promptly learned how to make about 50 different beds and shine 50 different shoes. So I was rewarded for coming on board before I was sent off to my basic training at Fort Dix.
Oh.
The memory is fresh in my mind. It was a great time.
And you learned how to roll underwear and socks.
Oh, did I ever? The sergeant made sure my brother and I both came in at the same time, and boy, we got it. We learned our lesson quickly.
Well, I tell you, I was in the reserves. I did not serve, as I always say, I did not serve in country during Vietnam, and now they got a label for us, Vietnam Veteran Era, and boy, did they make an era with me. But anyway,
come on, that's not true. You served. You did something for the country that many other people don't do these days.
Well, it's a shame that only 1% of our country.
That's right. You hit the nail on the head there. The percentage is so low that it's almost an embarrassment.
Yeah, and like I said, I think any kid that's graduating from high school and or college or whatever the situation is, and they haven't made up their mind what they want to do, the military offers so many
Come
options.
in whatever level you can. I came in as a recruit E1. I couldn't get promoted rapidly enough, so then I became a second lieutenant.
Yes, sir. So,
so it worked out.
And I'm honored that you're with us, and I'm standing at attention as we speak.
Oh, please. No.
Well, I was just I got out as an E5 grunt. My MOS was 11 Bravo and light arms infantry. So
I support that 100%. I served in the infantry in both assignments to Vietnam.
wow. Well, Vietnam got such a bad rap, and this is one reason that we do the show. Is that I must say that Rick White generally lines up the guests, as you know, and I've been delighted with everybody that we've spoken to. They're wonderful folks, and Vietnam. What people don't understand or may not remember, but in the late '60s, early '70s, before the war ended, you couldn't even walk through an airport with your uniform on. We were.
I remember those days.
Yeah.
When I came back from the first tour I had in Vietnam, in those days I boarded my aircraft actually with a loaded pistol and a rifle, and nobody said a word. I got off in San Francisco, and immediately there were negative feedback when they saw me in uniform.
Oh yeah.
So I know what you're talking about. But then, of course, all of that died down, thankfully.
Yes.
And I think finally people realized that we were there because our country wanted us there. We did what our country wanted us to do.
And that's what, we live even today, and there's no place in the world that doesn't have some kind of a problem or incident or this or that or something. But we still live in the best country in the world. And, another funny thing that's happened, Wulf, is that with all the veterans that we have interviewed, and it's getting up there now, I honestly, and to put you on the right track, Moses was a good friend of mine, so it's not like I just graduated from kindergarten. But anyway, I can't think of a person that we've talked to, either on the phone or in studio or whatever, that at the drop of a hat, any of us, if our country called us, we'd be in uniform. If we could get into it, we'd be in uniform the next day.
That's right.
Yeah,
if we could get into it, you're right.
and we have a prime example of it right here in America's Web Radio. General Richard Dix, did a show for us called "Remembering Desert Shield and Desert Storm." Both he served in, and he is a logistics expert. And when the pandemic hit and they started having the ventilator problems and even mask problems, he was retired, General retired, and they called him back up, which they can do anytime they want to, and he's back to serving his country. And
Excellent.
They didn't have to ask him but once. And,
you betcha.
And I don't think there's a person that served that wouldn't do the same thing in a heartbeat.
You're absolutely right.
We might have to learn how to manipulate walkers or something. But,
Yeah.
But it's and once you've been in, I don't want to say you're always in, but you always have a brotherhood there, and it doesn't matter what branch you're in or anything else. It's just a matter that, like you said
That's right.
earlier,
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head.
And we certainly promote kids taking a look at it. So, okay, you did 2 tours in Nam.
Yeah.
And your MOS was?
Well, I don't remember exactly what my MOS was, but what I do remember, the assignments were very interesting. The first one was in 1966 when I went over to Vietnam, and among all of the other lieutenants, we were raising hands. We were all collected in a huge room to go to different organizations, and they were calling them from a podium, and we were always sitting there with a lot of noise in the room, and being assigned to different organizations. If you'd raise your hand, and then you would walk up, and they would assign you to those. Well, I was sitting in the back, and I heard them say special services, which of course is the fellows that walk around the different organizations in the military with their donut dollies, and they deliver little goodies to eat and so on. So I raised my hand. Well, that's not what they were looking for. The actual call was for special forces.
Ah. a bit
So
different.
I got a quick wake-up call, and I was assigned to an A detachment in Vietnam, a wonderful group of people, one of whom, by the way, went through the officer candidate school with me at the artillery and missile school. So I was lucky to be there with somebody that I really liked and respected. But that was my first tour. The second tour was the 9th Infantry Division, ARVN, Republic of Vietnam Division, where I was a military advisor at the division level. They were both good assignments. What I remember most about Vietnam is obviously not the stuff you don't want to talk about, but I remember the good food and some of the good people. You know, my counterpart in my second tour was an Army major from North Vietnam who, if you can believe this, was a Catholic and had a wife with 9 children.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that was really something. What a wonderful individual that was, and what a wonderful family it was. So I remember that distinctly, a wonderful individual. And I'm sorry to say that when the communists took over South Vietnam, I suspect that his family paid the price. But I have no way of knowing that because we had already left.
You know,
Anyway, those were my tours over there in Vietnam. And I have a great deal of respect for the Vietnamese people, for what we were doing, and I think I enjoyed my duty there.
you know, that's another thing about the military. You'll make some friends that will be lifelong friends.
Yes.
They're even, and I don't know why, but other than I guess it's the common knowledge that they have your back and you have their back. But with that being said, they're better friends than you'll meet in college or any place else. And I've got a couple of them that we were at Fort Ord together. And
Great place.
you know, yeah, it was a beautiful place to go through basic and AIT. But you know, we're still friends and still communicate. And it's just something, like I said, it's a fraternity that's undescribable.
Yep.
And
California is a wonderful place to be.
Sure.
I was there once at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California.
Oh yeah, that's
where I
where
studied
Fort
Russian.
Ord is.
And I'm telling you, that is something I will never forget.
Oh, I'm
that
sure.
was one of my favorite tours. I wanted to flunk out of the course, so I'd have to repeat it. It was a year-long course, and it was absolutely delightful.
Oh yeah.
You see, Monterey, California, is very close to Carmel, as you know, having been there.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you, Carmel, for a young guy in his early 20s, is probably the place where every young American wants to be. And guess why that would be the case? What would you think? What was the case for Carmel? Why was that so attractive?
Well, I wasn't married, so I know the exact reason.
That's right.
You know,
that's the reason why. You're absolutely right.
And I tell you, the beach at Carmel was, when I was there, this was in 1970, and you'd go out there and you'd see all of these. Now you couldn't do it today because of the social distancing.
Right.
You'd have little. They'd look like a bunch of teepees. Actually, you'd have a group of 4 or 5, and they'd all have their heads down towards each other, and you'd have this little chimney of smoke coming up from the middle of all these little groups. And if you stood downwind, you could enjoy what they were enjoying.
Yeah.
But Carmel has to.
That was a beautiful place.
Oh.
I mean, Monterey was gorgeous. That was one of my favorite places in the world. And I remember even San Francisco in those days was remarkable. Today, of course, you don't want to go there.
No.
The streets are full of urine and other factors, trash all over the place. Yeah, it's disgusting. In those days, it was beautiful. You could walk down the street in San Francisco and smell the sourdough bread baking.
Yeah. I also spent some weekends in Salinas.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Salinas, that was my first introduction to the Hells Angels.
Yep,
and
I saw them come through Monterey once.
Yeah, and it was very interesting. But that whole area, the Monterey Peninsula, is just incredible. And Fort Ord, there's still a drill sergeant's Yogi the Bear hat buried under one of the matchstick barracks that they gave me the opportunity to live in for 6 months.
No kidding.
Yeah, we did the impossible. My best friend and I did the impossible. We stole a drill sergeant's hat, which, you thought the world had come to an end. But we did it and got away with it, and it's still there as far as I know. But yeah, it was a great. I loved it, and this is. I had very mixed emotions, and I don't know anybody that wouldn't. What am I getting myself into? But from almost the get-go, I loved it, and the only mistake I made was not staying in. And well,
it was worthwhile. That's why I stayed in. And then getting out afterwards was a pretty decent chunk of time as well. I took over a police force after that in Washington.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of interesting to go from the military to being a police officer.
Yeah, I guess. And I'm sure you had a lot of policing to do in Washington, D.C.
Oh, there was, yeah. We had a police force. We were responsible for all of the federal buildings in Washington. Not the city itself. With the police force for the city, of course, is entirely different. And in Washington, you have more police forces than you can shake a stick at.
Yeah, there's like, 5 or 6 different...
many more than that.
The
Library of Congress has its own police force.
Yeah, and
the Supreme Court has its own police force.
And representatives and Senate.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course they do. Yeah, absolutely. It's a large police force, as a matter of fact.
I was there at a convention and staying at the Marriott, and I kept seeing policemen come in with rifles, and they were going up to the roof because there was a demonstration.
That's right.
This was many years ago, and so as they would come down to eat, I must have bought 100 dinners that night, and but I'd buy them dinner every time they'd come down, and they got to talking about one of our presidents that used the old Oval Office for various and sundry things. I think.
I tell you, you want to hear an interesting story on that?
Sure, why not?
Well, when President Clinton was elected to become the president, I had my police force in Washington next to the Navy Yard where I had my headquarters. His people liked my headquarters and tossed me out of it so he could use it as a campaign headquarters. So I moved into another building. And then when he was actually brought on board, became the president, obviously my police force, because we were responsible for all the federal buildings, had to be where he was. So I was in a building where the GSA had storage stuff and so forth, and he and Vice President Gore came to that building, and I was standing in the corner away so that hopefully nobody could see me standing there. I was in my police uniform, standing against the wall. And suddenly, the president and Al Gore come walking toward me. I thought, what the hell? Why would they come to talk to me standing against the wall when they can barely even see me? But sure enough, there he came over, and he shook my hand, and we talked briefly. And in fact, I'm looking at a picture right now that was taken by the people who came with him. And I see on the picture that he and I are talking, shaking hands, and I'm in uniform, and the Vice President behind him, Gore, and the expression on his face looking at me, I'm sure that he was thinking, who in the dickens is this guy standing here, and why is the president talking with him? Anyway, I have that picture. Now, I found out later why they came over. Both the military officer assigned to be the aide to President Clinton and the one as an aide to Vice President Gore, they were former students of mine when I was a professor at West Point. And they did it. They caused it. They said, go over there, talk to this guy. And they called me up later on and told me what they had done. I said, well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, the White House sent me a nice picture signed by him. I thought that was nice. But again, it was kind of an embarrassment because I had no reason whatsoever to meet him. But I was standing against the wall, and my two buddies here, they wanted to make sure they gave me one. But they invited me to come to the White House, and I got a chance to go to the Oval Office and be in there and see what the hell that's like. So that was nice.
What did you teach at West Point?
They called me there to teach Russian because my Russian score was 100% on the exam. As you know, I'm a native German. So when they found out I'm a native German, guess what I was teaching?
Russian, huh?
No, not Russian. No. I was teaching German.
German, okay, sure.
Oh yeah, so that was nice. And in fact, one of the guys there who was in my class. He got a PhD in German after he graduated. He's now a full professor at the Army War College in Carlisle.
Wow.
And I sponsored him as a cadet when he was at West Point. And boy, did he blossom out. He's published 4 very academic books, and he's a brilliant scholar. And now a full professor at the Army War College.
Interesting.
Anyway, those are nice little mementos that I have of my military service.
Yeah, well, it's like I said. Do you know a veteran that can only tell one story?
That's right, absolutely.
Well, and this is another great opportunity to plug the military, and that if you don't go places, don't do things, then you don't have stories.
Well, I wouldn't have had the experiences I had if I hadn't gone in the military. I guarantee you, I would not have had the experiences. Nor would I have, in fact, been selected for the jobs that I had as a civilian after I retired from the Army, if I hadn't had the background that I brought with me from my tour, various things that I did in the Army. I mean, you've got the listing there. You can look at it and see. Maybe there's something you want me to talk about on the various assignments that I had or the memberships that I had. So if you want me to talk about something, I can touch base with anything you want me to talk about.
Well, okay, National Director of Legislative Affairs and former commander of ANU Garrison.
Yeah, that's the Army-Navy Union. That's something that most people aren't even aware of. And virtually every single member who served in the military, in the Army and the Navy, or even any other branch, can serve into the Army-Navy Union. And it's only by invitation. And because of my contacts that I had when I was in Washington, and particularly when I was the president of a group in the Senate, which consisted of military officers, most of them very senior general officers, and others who had worked on Capitol Hill. And they invited me to come there as a speaker when I was a chief of police for the federal police force. And they wanted me to become a member, and no sooner did I become a member than they made me the president, which kind of caught me by off guard. But that place, I mean, you got to know everybody who was anybody in the Senate. The guy who sponsored us at the time I was there was Bob Dole. Obviously, and then we went from there to John McCain when Bob Dole retired and so on. So you got to know these people, and that was one of the benefits of being in that place. You really got to meet some of the people that you would otherwise never ever have met. And we met once a week in the Senate itself. So the tour of duty I had there was only 1 year because the president stays in office for 1 year, and then you're just a member.
How did you get into the policing end of it?
Well, that's a good question. When I retired from the military, I went to work for GSA, and they hired me into the Office of Law Enforcement and Security. And that's the GSA has a huge police force across the country for all of the federal buildings in the U.S. The chief of police for Washington that's the largest group. I had like 350 officers and about 3,000 or so contractors. But they hired me as a director of operations for law enforcement based on my military background. And I questioned that because I was not a police officer in the military, but yet I had management experience and leadership experience. So the director of the group in the GSA decided they wanted me to take over as the director for the chief of police for the Washington area. That was the largest one we had. And that's how I got selected into it.
Interesting.
So they simply said, well, he's competent to handle it. Bingo, make him a police officer. So that's what I did.
Well,
this is fine.
This is an interesting conversation, and with that being said, I slipped by the 10:30 mark, which generally speaking we'd take a break, but our break is to promote the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, and it's downtown, right across the street from the Capitol, and we invite everybody. It's open Monday through Friday. And go down, look around. You'll read some stories. Be sure you take time to do it and do it right by reading about this guy, this lady, that lady. And there'll be interesting stories. And if you have someone that's been inducted into the Hall of Fame, you obviously want to find them. And if you're not with your kids, if you have your kids and can tell them about what grandfather did or grandmother did or whatever the situation is, it's a wonderful experience. And I say spend a day, but you could easily spend a couple of days. And we certainly invite everybody that's listening. If you're coming to Atlanta, or even if you live in Atlanta, there's so many people that don't know about the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame that we invite you to go to it. And also go out to, Georgia's getting to be quite a area for veterans. And the healing wall that's coming to Johns Creek, or is in Johns Creek.
Oh, it is. It's ready for people to visit. It is truly worth a visit.
Oh, yeah, and I live right around the corner from it. And Mike Mazzell is a good friend. And
he's a member of our group as well, of course.
Right. And then you also got the Peachtree Corners Memorial. And, it's just people are appreciating and associating North Georgia with veterans, which I think is just absolutely great. And, again, if you're fortunate enough to be at the Wall or be at Peachtree Corners and you've got a group of veterans there, I don't think there's a veteran one that wouldn't mind you eavesdropping on the story they're telling. And there are great stories from. It doesn't matter whether it's World War II, Vietnam, or Korea, Vietnam, whatever. And General Dix has some very interesting stories from Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So, find you a group of veterans that are talking and say, do you mind if I just listen? And you'll learn some things that you didn't know before. And I want to mention, too, because of this show, we'll be starting a new show very soon, 2 new shows. One strictly about Vietnam, and want the veterans to tune in to it. Do you know Pete Mecca?
Yes.
Okay, well, Pete's going to be doing a show for us. And then we've also got, because I've been called a person with an attitude. And,
is that right?
Yeah, and I do have an attitude about our public education and the fact that history isn't being taught anymore. So we're going to start a program about history, and it'll basically be for veterans and wars and kids to
I think it's very important to do that. I'm glad you're doing that, Dave, because quite frankly, the history goes. If you ask people about the history, if you're interested, I can give you some history that takes it back to the early 19th century. That is quite remarkable, and that's one of the reasons I'm an American today, as a matter of fact.
Well, I tell you, if you want to get me upset, just talk about rewriting history. And I didn't know you could do that. I thought history was history, and yet
depends on who writes it, Dave.
Yeah, and now they're coming out with different stories about the same place, and I go ballistic over that. So we're going to be. We've got a professor from South Georgia, and that's going to be doing the show. And he and I concur on rewriting history. That history is history, and you can't change it. And you may not like it, but you can't change it. And we all live through different times. And I've said this again many times over and over again, which people are probably bored with it, but. It's like this pandemic, and when I was working at station KLVK in Lubbock, Texas, that was when Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh, I remember that day. I know exactly where I was on that day.
Yeah, so do I. And
exactly.
We all went in to the station, and we figured, well, the general manager has to have a book on a shelf that says when a president is assassinated.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any book like that, nor was there a book on when the country is hit by a pandemic. And I'm sure radio stations all across the country were, and around the world for that matter, were trying to find that book. But there'll be a lot of them now. I can.
Now, you
guarantee
being
it.
in the radio, I guess you had access years ago to Wolfman Jack, did you?
Oh yeah, certainly.
Well, let me tell you something about
This is
Wolfman
the
Jack,
Wolfman.
which is the God's truth. I met him in let me see when that was, 1995, I believe it was, when he came to Washington, and he was signing books. And somebody called me and said, Wolf, the Wolfman is here. I said, come on, you're kidding. I said, no, he's signing books across the street from where our headquarters was.
Huh.
So I went over there, and there was nobody in line for the books, because I guess I got there kind of late. And I walked up to him, and I said, hi, I'd love to get one of your books. And he said, well, what's your name? I said, my name is Wolf. He said, no, what's your name? I said, my name really is Wolf. And he said, I don't believe it. First Wolf I've met. So he handed me a book made out to Wulf, W-U-L-F, -man, Wolfman, and he signed it Wolfman Jack, and then he put after that, what a howl, and drew a face and signed it. And on top of that, I had a picture taken, shaking hands with him, and he signed that. Now, the reason I mention all of that is the following morning, I read in the newspaper in North Carolina that he died.
Wow.
So the picture that I have with him and the event that occurred in Washington was the very last time that he was in public.
Wow.
And I have that picture right here in front of me at home right now. I'm looking at it. And I'm telling you, the meeting with him was something I remember for a long time. He was one heck of a nice guy. Down to earth, a wonderful individual, and I was truly sorry to read in the newspaper. I couldn't believe it. So let me tell you, Dave, don't ever have a picture taken with me.
I'll remember that.
Okay.
I'll remember that.
Anyway, I thought you'd be interested in that.
Oh,
That was kind of unique. The last picture of him alive was me and Wolfman Jack shaking the Wolf-man's hand. And he put that in the book. I couldn't believe it.
And listened to him many times, I'd listen to him as I was driving.
Well, he was a good guy, down to earth. Loud. You could understand every word he said, and he was an absolutely wonderfully entertaining individual.
And didn't mind howling.
That's a fact.
Well, this is fascinating. Let me throw the ball back in your court.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that anybody knows you better than yourself. What stands out besides Wolfman? What stands out in your mind as the most important thing that's happened to you in your career?
Well, the most important thing that happened in my career is actually becoming an American. I remember when World War II ended, I was 3 years old, and I lived in a place called Bad Tölz in Bavaria. Beautiful, beautiful place. Now, it was not touched by the war. The buildings dated back to the year 800 or even before. It was a gorgeous place. And guess what? General Patton made it his headquarters in Germany after World War II. Wow. And I was fortunate enough to be there at that time. And when I left there, I was about 5 or 6 years old. And the kids and I would always go to where General Patton had his headquarters. His headquarters was in a German caserne that was actually a training caserne for SS officers. He renamed it to Flint Caserne. Flint was a colonel who was killed in General Patton's staff, so he renamed it in his honor. I remember sitting there and seeing American soldiers come out and with my friends, and they would always have something for us. For the first time in my life, I got an ice cream. I didn't even know it existed. Huh. I mean, I marveled at the taste of ice cream. I said, what is this? And I told all my friends, so the number of the kids increased dramatically when they heard of what I had, what the goodies I got. What followed there, in fact, caused me then to be an American. My father, obviously, was a German. He served in the German Navy at the time, and my mother assumed he was killed, so she married an American officer who was on General Patton's staff. His name was Colonel Zedler, Leonard W. Zedler. He became my stepfather, and in fact, he is my real. I mean, I see him as my real father because he's the reason I'm an American. And then I learned how to speak English at that time as a young guy, and then finally, ultimately, I went to American schools and so on. But but all of that is the reason I'm an American today, which I thought was kind of interesting. Both my mother married a staff officer on General Patton's staff, and my mother's sister, who lived with us there, married a friend of his. And I call him Uncle Wilbur. He, too, was a colonel in the Army. Died recently. In fact, his name is, let me see if I remember, Colonel Packett, Wilbur L. Packett. He was the last living member of General Patton's staff, and he's now buried in Arlington National, as is my mother and my stepfather. And hopefully, by the time my comes, which could be any day now, I hope to have a place there, too, because that's obviously the place where all of us want to be and should be. Anyway, I thought you'd be interested in that.
Yeah,
It's kind of an interesting story.
It's a fascinating story, and I appreciate you telling it and sharing part of your family with us. That's fascinating.
Well, I learned to respect. You see, I couldn't speak English at the time, nor did I care. And they didn't. I had no idea that American soldiers were different from German soldiers or from anybody else. They were people, and they brought us cookies and ice cream. So for me, they were heavenly angels.
You know that there have been so many movies made about World War II and showing officers and enlisted it as well.
Sure.
Giving all the kids in Germany.
That's right, exactly. For the kids, they were the most wonderful thing in the world. We didn't have anything like that available on the economy. In fact, we were lucky to have food.
Yeah.
So to get that kind of a goodie, wow. I mean, and then when she married an American officer, then of course we were home free.
Well, that chocolate will get you every time.
Yep. Well, those are marvelous days, and Bad Tölz in Germany and Bavaria is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I love it, and I will go back there any day to just simply marvel at how beautiful it is.
My son enjoys it. He's stationed in Ronstadt. So but he will be coming home, and I will probably, this is his, be his first tour in the United States, other than.
I'd love to meet him. Give me a holler.
Oh, I will, and then he would like to get a position in the Pentagon, or at least in D.C.
Well, let me know, because maybe I can help.
Well, that's what I had in mind, as a matter of fact. I
know some Army generals who are friends of mine who were, people that I served with there and who, I was with them when they served in Germany. They're retired now, but a general always has contacts.
Well, it's sort of like the White Christmas. What does a general do when a general retires? Well, they never retire, really.
They never do retire, of course not.
And their knowledge is so deep and so respected that we should never let them retire.
Well, the guy that I'm referring to, he was the deputy chief of Army Intelligence at the Pentagon, and he was a major general at the time. I served with him in Germany, and I was the chief of counter-espionage and counter-terrorism and intelligence for northern Germany.
Wow.
I was an intelligence officer at that time. And, so that guy, I mean, the stories he can tell and the people he knows, it's utterly amazing. And we're still in contact, by the way.
That's neat.
I call him every now and then to harass him. We tell each other war stories. And, and if we don't like the story, we make up one to counter what he's telling me.
I can't imagine a veteran doing that.
Oh, absolutely not. We tell nothing but the truth, of course.
That's right. With your left hand raised.
That's right. Or your fingers crossed.
Yeah. But did you ever spend any time in Russia?
No, I didn't, as a matter of fact, and I was not allowed to go there. I couldn't go to East Germany or Russia because of the clearances I had in the Army Intelligence. And they had an arrest warrant out for me. If I set foot in East Germany or Russia, they would have arrested me immediately.
Wow. Well,
you forget that I was born in what was then at that time East Germany.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And they knew full and well who I was. I know that they knew where our intelligence headquarters was when we were in Frankfurt. I know that because I saw a guy photographing us when we went in.
Huh.
And I tried to catch him, but I wasn't fast enough. He got away.
We do a show called Agent in Charge, or Special Agent in Charge, and that's Sandy Bostic, who was his last duty was to be Homeland Security agent in charge in El Paso, but he spent much of his career in Moscow.
Well, if he was an agent, I'm looking at let me see, I have 3 awards that I have. One here is the Army retired Department of the Army award for being an agent there, and it has my old shield in it. Then I have another one from my police chief days, the Federal Protective Service one, and then I have another one from the Office of the Inspector General, where I was in the head of the security for the Middle East. And so I have 3 of these different shields that I wore in my uniforms after I retired. And it was kind of interesting. So, well, one of them, of course, was a military one, but we didn't wear the badge. We simply had the MOS, that's all. But those were days, long gone.
Those are days long gone.
Yeah, so today I'm not only retired, but I tell people that I'm retarded. So then they won't bug me. They say, "Oh no, he's retarded. Don't bother him."
Well, the days are gone, but the memories will never fade.
No, they won't. And it's good to meet people like Rick, for example, Rick White.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
such an interesting chap, and if anybody goes to the Hall of Fame that he in fact is primarily in charge of, hopefully they'll meet him there, and if nothing else, they can call him and he'll meet them there, I'm sure. Very interesting guy and a good fellow to know.
And Paul Lingear is a great guy.
Well, quite frankly, anybody listening to the radio show today, if I can put a plug in for the Johns Creek Veterans Association, I would like to do so.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I think all veterans should consider. They don't have to be very important people. They don't have to have important jobs. They have to be a veteran, and that's all they have to be. And once they're a veteran, they are eligible, and we would accept them with open arms.
And by the way, I want to throw out that when I've gone, they've done that, and like I said, I didn't serve in Nam. I served in the reserves.
But you served. It doesn't matter. You served. That's the important point. Not where you served or when you served, but you served. That's what we're looking for in the Johns Creek Veterans Association.
And they're a bunch of nice guys.
You bet.
Even
Rick
those
White,
guys.
for those listening, they can reach him. He can bring them on board for sure. You can get him on the email, for example, Rick White, altogether. It's spelled R-I-C-K, White, W-H-I-T-E, altogether, Rick White 4750 at gmail.com. You get in touch with him, he can tell you what to do, how to do it, and he'll bring you on board.
I don't know how, when you were serving exactly, but I go back far enough that we didn't use our Social Security numbers. We still had military numbers.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I had those when I first joined the Army, yes.
Yeah. And
I also had those when I first got commissioned. And then after that, we used our Social Security, unfortunately, but that's been done away with now. So on my retired military card, there is no Social Security number.
Huh. I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah. It's deleted. It's not. In fact, that was deleted years ago, maybe 10 years ago.
Huh.
So there is no more Social Security on the retired military. It's only the name, the rank, and that's it.
Name,
and then
rank,
it tells you how long the card is valid for.
Name,
and as
rank,
a retired guy, it's valid for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it used to be name, rank, and serial number.
That's it, yeah. Serial number is no longer there, and the Social Security number is definitely not there. Which is a good thing. I mean, that's, if you have copies of that, you go somewhere, they make copies, look out. You get a lot of strange people accessing it, and you don't need that.
Well, one last, we got about 5 minutes to go, 4.5 minutes. Well, anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to cover besides the fact of inviting everybody to Johns Creek and the Healing Wall and Peachtree Corners with your old's memorial.
Well, I think there's so much here in Georgia that I'm so delighted to actually be here in Georgia. I can't tell you. I was so happy to leave Washington, D.C. after spending so many years there after I retired. I mean, I would not recommend trying to live there as opposed to here. This is a much better life, much better life. And there is so much here for veterans, and there's so much appreciation for veterans. I think people really ought to take note of that. And the Johns Creek Veterans Association is one of them. You know, and there are so many other organizations you can join. For example, I'm here in Georgia, and I have something called the Military Officers and the MOFW, Military Officers of Foreign Wars. So anybody who served as an officer in a foreign war any time, they're eligible to join. And we've got quite a few people here in Georgia, would you believe? We call it a commandery. I'm the commander of that for Georgia.
That's super.
You know, so we've got some people in Johns Creek who are actually members of that as well now.
Let me ask, what are y'all doing on the distancing thing with, I know you meet on Wednesday nights.
Well, you wear the mask. Now we have something coming up on the 24th where everybody who's a member is invited. If and if you want to become a member, show up there at the wall. We'll bring you on board. But we have distancing in effect. You wear the mask as well. Now you have the choice of wearing it or not wearing it. If you come there with family members, you don't have to wear it, obviously, if you choose not to. But if you don't, and you're sitting with somebody else, then you do have to have a mask on, even though there is a 6-foot distancing requirement. So, you know, again, you can make the choice. If you choose not to do that, that's okay too.
Well, I tell you what, knowing I don't know that many that are in Johns Creek, but the ones I do know, you can't be with a better group of folks. And,
no, you're absolutely right. They are, in fact, they are wonderful people. We have all services represented, all services, and that is a wonderful thing. I was sitting at the table when Rick brought me on board there. I sat at a table with Navy people, Marine Corps people, and I told them that I will not say anything funny about of that, and I will not tell them that I'm sorry they didn't become Army people, but I accept them as equals. And they grinned and they said, "This guy can't be all bad."
Who is the gentleman, and I can't think of his name, but the gentleman that was a submariner that seems to be a fairly dominant individual in Johns Creek?
Well, I don't know enough people to actually make an intelligent comment on that. I would be guessing. I don't know that. I may have met him. I may not. I don't know.
I can't remember his name, but I sat across from him at a dinner there, and he was. I mean, I couldn't keep from smiling as he was telling his stories.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. And if you've never, well, I don't know a veteran that doesn't still talk to other veterans, and it's always fun. And like you said, it doesn't matter what you did. We all went through some of the same stuff together. And
well, that's right. A veteran is a veteran, and you don't have to have been there in magnificent places and done heroic things. And no, that's not required. If you're a veteran, that means you served your country, and that's what this is all about.
Yes, sir. With that being said, we got to put a plug in the jug and get out of here. Get ready for Ron Bachman and his show, Healthcare Insight. And Wulf, I want to thank you, and I hope that we get to meet one of these days in person. And who knows, by then maybe we can shake hands.
Yes, sir. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. And really, I'm very appreciative of what you're doing with your web radio, America's Web Radio. Wonderful organization. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you,
I
sir.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're listening to America's Web Radio.
Are you still there?
Broadcast
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I am.
Okay.